reporting partner, the Washington Post during Watergate, Carl Bernstein. It's a pleasure to have you both with us. Bob, when you look at how Republicans now continue to entertain President Trump's lies and conspiracies and baseless claims of voter fraud and election fraud, what does it tell you about the grip this president will have on the Republican Party for the next 4 years?
Well, we did, at least for the next 50 days, it's going to be rather absolute. I think it's shameful, quite frankly, the way the Republicans have just kowtowed to this. Now, Trump clearly is a political force. Those 74 million people who voted for him, it's amazing, but this, I think, after January 20th will start to crack. And I know, as Carl knows privately, lots of these senators will just say they want to get Trump out of there, they want to move on, and they're keeping their fingers crossed.
Carl, can they move on? I mean, if he is threatening to run again and holding that over the head of all these Republicans, who many of whom themselves want to run.
They could show some courage instead of continuing to enable a shameful president of the United States who continues to attempt a coup. He continues to attempt a coup, and not a serious leader of the Republican Party has come out and said, this must stop, Mr. President. He continues to undermine the electoral system for the future, so that this election is called into doubt because of his lies by so many people. Look, Richard Nixon was a criminal president who was held to account because people in his own party said, Mr. President, you cannot do these criminal acts. What Donald Trump is a subversive American president such as we've never seen, who has subverted the national interest at every turn. We have hundreds of thousands of Americans dead and dying because of his homicidal negligence, and he continues to abdicate his responsibilities while more and more people die, and he focuses on his own narrow, selfish interests. We've never seen anything like this, and it is an episode in our history that is going to resonate for a long time, especially for the Republican Party.
Bob, I mean, obviously, look, politicians, have lied before, but the scale of it, the brazenness of it, the complete disregard for what is true and not, and the acceptance by the president's supporters of his lies is extraordinary. Can things ever go back? I mean, or does everybody have free reign to just live in their own reality? And I'm talking about every politician have free reign to live in their own reality and just say whatever they want, free of concern about what is actually true.
Well, I don't think people are going to try to pull Trump's stunts in the exact same way. They may do it differently, but we're talking about the final days here, and I think it is the final days of Trump. And the interesting question is, does it mirror and resemble what happened to Nixon in 1974? And as you may recall, the Nixon final days had some real weird episodes, like Nixon and his Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, getting down on their knees and praying together as the president pounded the carpet, asking the question, what has happened? What have I done? Also, Nixon's son-in-law, Eddie Cox, called Senator Griffin, who was a senator from Michigan at the time, very close to Richard Nixon. And Eddie Cox said, we're really worried about the president. He was up talking to the pictures of former presidents giving speeches. We're worried that he might take his own life. I don't think it has reached that point with Trump, but that speech last night was one of the most bizarre performances I have ever seen. Not only detached from reality, but he actually got somebody to write it, because he had a teleprompter there saying all these things that make no sense. And as Carl points out, the number one calamity for this nation now is the pandemic. And for 10 months, Trump has ignored, when I did one of these interviews with Trump, I said, what's the job of the president? And Trump said, to protect the people. And he has failed in a way that truly is unimaginable to protect the people that he's supposed to lead.
And Carl, I mean, the comparisons to the final days of Nixon, and those details that Bob was just talking about are, extraordinary. I'd forgotten about the paintings and him speaking to the paintings and the concerns about him taking his own life. Do you see it? Do you see parallels?
I see something far worse, because what Donald Trump has done is, from the beginning of his presidency, but in the final days and the final months, more than at any other time, he has undermined the interest of the United States, the health and welfare of its people. We have bread lines. No, but we haven't seen bread lines in this country since the Depression. That's really what these food lines are about. We haven't heard a peep out of this President of the United States, nor about the coronavirus, which is killing our people by the hundreds of thousands. But let's talk about son-in-laws, as Bob just did. Eddie Cox was not a co-conspirator in the presidency of his father-in-law. Let's look at Jared Kushner. Let's look at the pardons that we know the president is now considering for his grifter children, for his daughter, for his son-in-law. What is that all about? What does that tell us about the values of this president of the United States? Where is the national interest? And what are these pardons about, and what have they been about? Continuing the cover-ups that have started early in this presidency and are going through the final days of this presidency, so that people can't be prosecuted and information cannot be obtained. Look at Paul Manafort, the president's campaign manager, who was in contact with Russian agents, and we know is the point of contact with the Russians. We don't know about his discussions with Donald Trump, with Roger Stone. The cover-ups continue, including the financial interests that were pursued by the president while he was in office, and his children. So these final days are unique in our history in terms of the venality, a venal situation and president of the United States.
Yeah, and Bob, 48 days to go. A lot can happen in 48 days. I want to play part of your interview with President Trump back from July 21st.
The question is going to be, we're going to look back and we're going to say, at the end of July, August, September, October, what happened with the virus? People want, we've talked about this. People want their president to succeed. Now, you're right, there's some people who don't.
No, I think you're wrong.
But
People don't want me to succeed.
no, but if you succeed, they succeed.
Even the rhinos don't want me to succeed. They'll end up with the Supreme Court and lots of things that they're not going to be too happy with.
Is there any lesson you take? Because I think this is so important. I have, I keep, because I'm in the business of trying to understand other people, I keep learning about how do you really understand people? How do I understand you? I mean, you and I have...
You don't understand me. You don't understand me. But that's okay. You'll understand me after the election. But you don't understand me now.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so. I don't think you get it. And
what are the questions I've not asked that have not been answered?
I think you've asked me a lot of very good questions, a lot of personal questions. I think you've asked me a lot of good stuff.
You'll know me after the election. I mean, you'll see who I am after the election.
That's the
to me,
remark
that's
that really,
yeah.
it really counts.
Yeah, I mean, Bob, we are seeing who this president is right now. I mean, the display you talked about in that rambling 46 minutes when he was talking yesterday, which we didn't even air because it's just so full of lies.
Yeah, rightly so. I mean, when he says, I don't understand him, we do understand Trump now. And the difficulty is larger than anybody could have expected. I don't think he knows the difference between the truth and untruth. And when something comes up, if he decides it is to his advantage to speak untruth, he will do it easily, happily. And if the truth on rare occasions serves him, he will do that. I just want to read, there was one other thing we played in this, now that the pandemic has struck, and this has, Carl was asking about Jared Kushner and so forth, and here's one of the things. 7 months ago, Jared Kushner said, oh, we're now in the comeback phase of dealing with the pandemic, and, quote, Trump's now back in charge, it's not the doctors. Now think about that somehow it is a great thing that Trump has sidelined the doctors, and look at what the result is. I mean, that is something you don't want on your tombstone.
You know, CNN is
Let
reporting
me
tonight
say
that-
one other
go
thing
ahead.
you don't
Go
want
ahead,
on, go ahead.
No, go.
One other thing that you don't want on your tombstone is Mitch McConnell not talking about this, not coming on this broadcast. The Republican leaders not addressing this. This is on their tombstones, not just Donald Trump's. That's what's so extraordinary about what we're going through. Not saying to the President of the United States, we are going to put down this coup that you have attempted, Mr. President. We are going to speak the truth, unlike you. We have not had that in 4 years.
Bob, obviously the pardons, there's been reporting on the president looking into, a variety of pardons for, as Carl keeps saying, his kids. I believe it was grifter kids, Carl said, and others, possibly Jared Kushner's father, even. President Nixon, of course, was pardoned by President Ford. The only way I assume President Trump would likely be pardoned is if he did it himself, which I'm not even sure. I mean, if we talk to some legal analysts, it's not clear exactly who would have to determine if that's even constitutionally allowed. But Ford wrote in his autobiography that Nixon's pardon wasn't motivated primarily by sympathy for his plight or by concern over the state of his health. It was the state of the country's health at home and around the world that worried me. It was criticized a lot at the time. I'm wondering how history views that now.
Well, in a very interesting way, I think it was 1998, well, 25 years after Watergate. Ford had been out of office for 2 decades. I went to interview him at his home in Rancho Mirage, California, and asked, say, well, why didn't you get an admission from former President Nixon that he had committed crimes? So Ford opens his wallet and pulls out a little newspaper clipping, and it's a clipping from a Supreme Court decision, 1915, the verdict decision, in which it said that the acceptance of a pardon is a confession of it. And Ford held that out and said, so I got him to say, Uncle, I got him to say, at least legally, that he had confessed to the crimes of Watergate.
That's really interesting. Do you think he carried that, put it in his wallet to show you, or do you think he carried that with him like all the time?
No, it was yellowed and folded,
Wow.
and I suspect he showed it to lots of people.
That's really interesting. Wow. Bob,
Yeah,
yeah.
he wanted to.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Bob.
No, he wanted to make it clear, and of course the most important thing that Ford did here, he really took the nation on the road of healing.
Yeah.
And as he said, the long national nightmare is over.
Yeah.
And he took a lot of heat for pardoning Nixon,
Yeah,
and Carl and I now think it was the right thing to do.
We got to leave it there. Bob Woodward, Carl Bernstein, thank you. One last note
Great
for all of us.
act of courage.
Carl, thanks. Even as we've been talking, the COVID death toll